Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. We often talk, as I have mentioned in a few videos over the last week or two, about the same types of places. So we talk about UAE, we talk about Portugal, we talk about Cyprus and Thailand and Mexico, etc. But I think sometimes it is because there's kind of this echo chamber of everyone discussing the same places. And so over the last week or 2 weeks, whatever it is, I have tried to mention a few places that are less common on people's radar. And frankly, there's sometimes good reasons why they're less popular. However, I do think it's a fun theme to continue on. And so today I'm going to talk to you about 4 kind of non-correlated areas of the world to potentially find freedom, to potentially avoid COVID, etc. And so it'll give you maybe some different ideas of places to think about that are not the norm of what people are paying attention to. Some of them will be, more common for people, but I kind of will try and keep it as an exploration of areas that you might not normally traditionally be thinking of, and then hopefully over the next while we'll explore some of them a little bit more in depth, and then some other places that, again, people are not talking about so much. So let's dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Really appreciate your support all throughout the year. Thank you very much for subscribing and helping us out. If you'd like help with the topics we deal with here, which is international asset protection and tax planning, forming companies, opening bank accounts, getting residencies, citizenships, figuring out where to move and getting set up there, please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below. Or you can send a message through our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so just a quick note. There is a reason that the 4 places I'm going to mention do not get talked about that much. So I think sometimes some people will get the idea that because I talk about some place and I mention some qualities that certain people may enjoy about it, that I'm recommending that place. In general, I try not to recommend places per se. What I try to do is communicate a little bit about that place, and for some people those qualities will be good, for some people those qualities will be bad. I'm in Dubai at the moment, and I happen to like Dubai a lot. This being, and a lot of other people like Dubai. However, there's a bunch of people for whom Dubai is not a good fit at all. Likewise, there are other parts of the world that you might go where somebody might say, this is horrific, this is terrible, I don't like the poor healthcare system, or I don't like the bureaucracy, or something like that. And, that's fine, to each their own, right? There's every year many people who want to travel to places and relocate to places like Canada, the US, Australia, etc. Probably most of the people on this channel are moving away from those places. So there's always an individual preference based on your objectives, based on where you're at in life, based on your values, etc. So these are going to be unusual places. However, there's a reason why they're unusual. There's definitely drawbacks. So with that in mind, let's talk about it. So number 1, Moldova. I talked a bit recently about Romania. I think Romania is quite underrated in the world in that it doesn't get that much attention, but actually, it's got a lot going for it. It certainly is, at least in my opinion, worth talking about a lot more than we hear about it. And, there's tax benefits, there's lifestyle benefits, there's, a good population base, there's a bunch of things for it. And so that's good. Moldova is kind of like the baby brother or baby sister of Romania. If you haven't been there, it's really, for sure, one of the poorest places in Europe. And so there's lots to dislike about Moldova for many people. My experience is most of the Moldovan people I know basically end up moving to either Romania or to Russia. I don't see a lot of people moving into Moldova. This being said, when you talk about certain freedoms, etc., such as related to COVID, it's great. Their tax system is quite competitive with much of the rest of the world. You can end up with a sub 10% tax rate pretty easily in most cases. And so again, that's attractive. Now, again, there's lots of reasons to dislike Moldova, but if you're looking for getting away from a lot of what you find in the West, well, that might be a place to go. Place number 2 is Nicaragua. So I remember I lived in Costa Rica for 3 winters, and Nicaragua was always the less developed area, and honestly, the infrastructure in Costa Rica was not amazing. So, that's a little bit of a trade-off. However, that being said, I've found more and more people have been going to Nicaragua, and certainly it's one of the places that has remained quite open. There's definitely, weaknesses in terms of infrastructure, etc. But from a tax standpoint, it can be quite favorable due to the nature of how they have their territoriality set up. And again, it's just not a place that people are talking about too much. But if you're wanting to go to some place that is not correlated with kind of the Western developed world, then this is a place that you can definitely find something a little bit interesting. Third place, people don't talk about that much. Actually, I spent part of my honeymoon there, is Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka, for those of you who aren't familiar, is kind of an island nation near India, and maybe got into the news for some bad press. There was a bombing at the Shangri-La Hotel there a number of years back, and certainly it is less developed, less functional. It's kind of competing a little bit with places like Bali, Thailand, etc. And certainly just the infrastructure is worse in this regard. It's pretty hard to get around. If you're going by car, it takes a long time to travel not very far. There's a lot of beautiful wildlife there. It is maybe one of the best places for going and seeing leopards, for example. It's pretty known in certain areas for some surfing and the beach. It's got some diversity in general. Now, why I bring it up is because in terms of how they've approached banking, etc., they are a departure from the norm. Also, it's pretty early on in the development of Sri Lanka, so there may be some opportunities that you can take advantage of there that are not in other places. Overall, again, like all these places I'm talking about, there's a bunch of reasons why you'd say, it's maybe not where I want to go live, it's maybe not where I want to set up, etc. But for certain types of people, hey, listen, you can go there. If I recall correctly, the second biggest tea producer, there's some really great different types of teas there. So you can go and tour tea plantations, etc. Get the gold tip and the silver tip teas, which are really fantastic. And yeah, they I think export the second most out of any country in the world. So big production in that regard, and some very wonderful people there. I've had some clients from there, and so something else to consider. Not a place where you're going to get an amazing passport or something like that, but as a place that again is non-correlated to much of the rest of the world, that would be one. The fourth one touches on a part of the world that we don't really discuss, right? It's like in this whole discussion of the globe, we hear about North America because usually people are leaving various parts of there and then going elsewhere. Okay, interested in Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, more recently El Salvador, the Caribbean, stuff like that. But generally speaking, you get that, and then you get some focus, a little bit less, I would say, in South America. You get Paraguay, you get Uruguay, you get Argentina in its own way, Chile, Peru, Colombia. A bunch of people like Colombia. More recently, Ecuador, people are talking about for farmland, etc. So you get some conversation there. Easy to get citizenship if you marry a Brazilian or have a Brazilian child. So there's that as well. So you've got some conversations in those areas. It tends to be easy to get second residencies. Also, we hear lots about Europe, clearly, and then we hear a bunch of Asia. But where we don't hear about is Africa. And so, again, it's not hard to understand why it is that we don't hear much about Africa. However, this being said, I have mentioned on this channel previously that I've done some hiring in Africa, and actually one of my top employees in one of my companies is from Kenya, and so Kenya is the place that I'm going to mention. It's interesting that, in his words, COVID seems to have largely spared Africa. Now, that's an interesting statement, an interesting perspective on it. But generally speaking, you can find it has been restriction-free. It's also got alarmingly great weather. Like if you look at the weather in Kenya, pretty much year-round, it's 18 to 28 degrees kind of thing. Almost never changes. And so it's an area of the world that, from that standpoint, from this the climate as well as from some of the freedoms, etc. Again, pros and cons in certain ways. If we look, for example, cryptocurrency is not well accepted in Kenya. You pay people with M-Pesa and things like this. Like, there's some complications there. And again, certainly lots of reasons to dislike, most of Africa if you're interested in, certain of the things that you get that aren't African, right? This being said, it's an area that obviously over time is going to progress a lot. And I think as an area to explore for different opportunities, and in particular for a non-correlated life, non-correlated possibilities. We mentioned, previously Zanzibar, etc., but generally haven't talked too much about Africa. And so Kenya, I think, is one that some people may want to look at for, again, some of these different opportunities. Probably not on banking, but possibly on a place to consider maybe getting some property, spending some time. There's a lot of really beautiful area there, for sure, lots of wildlife, and so, yeah, something to check out. Anyway, I hope that gives you kind of idea of 4 different places that are outside of your normal scope. I would love to hear ones that you have to mention. Certainly we haven't talked here too much about Central Asia, aside from Georgia, but I think we can have some conversations later about some of the areas. I happen to personally really love Azerbaijan. I've mentioned in some previous videos about how Baku is a wonderful city. There's a bunch of areas that just don't get the attention, and so I'm going to try and bring some focus to some unorthodox areas over the next few months, and yeah, share with me the ones that you find should probably get more attention than they do, or that you've been that you really like and people don't talk about, and maybe we can explore them. I hope it helps, and we will see you on the next video.